Joel Peters. I'm a Greeley police officer. I've been here for about 3 years. Prior to this, I went to Colorado State University, earned a bachelor's degree in social work. And prior to that, I spent a little over 8 years in the Marine Corps as a military policeman. The reason that I got out of the Marine Corps was in May of 2009. My unit was training in Africa, and this day, our infantry element of my unit, they were doing a mortar range. And what a mortar is it's like think of an explosive, and it's what you see in the movies. They drop it into the tube, and it shoots out, and it explodes far away. The mortar men were on their range, and a mortar actually went off in the tube. So what that is, it's a decent explosion right in front of these two Marines. I had just come back from resupplying that range because I was an MP and I was in charge of security for convoys to and from. So I knew the route back. Normally, helicopters would be sent to the site, and they would get the Marines out. On this particular day, the helicopters were not available. So there was one Marine significantly injured, shrapnel and gravel and stuff. The other one was we call it urgent surgical, which is the worst of the worst. So he was bleeding out. He'd taken the most damage from that mortar exploding in the tube, and we're talking, just a few feet in front of him. This goes off. I'd come back from that range. I'd missed it by a few minutes, the actual explosion. Anyway, I get back to the range, and I get on I'm told that there's been something drastic or something really bad just happened at the mortar range. And Sergeant Peters, you know how to get back there, so get inside this Humvee ambulance and show our docs how to get there. So I get in, I'm sitting right behind the driver, and on our way there, something happened, and we fishtailed. I was thrown out, and the driver was thrown out in front of me. I don't remember any of this, and this is all what was told to me and what came out in the investigation, but either the ambulance didn't have doors, it had little canvas doors that were they weren't really secure at all. Additionally, the seat belts, it was an old Humvee, wouldn't fit over my gear. That's the only likely explanation for why I wasn't secured inside that Humvee, and the same with the driver. So the way that we fishtailed, he and I both got tossed out. I went about 10 feet in one direction. He went 20 feet in another direction. He broke, I think, his pelvis, a femur. He broke a bunch of bones on the lower half. I broke four bones in my back. I broke a rib, collapsed a lung, and I had a basilar skull fracture from I smacked my head on the ground hard enough to where I looked at my helmet afterwards, months later, and a screw from my helmet actually is what caused the basilar skull fracture. So that's more or less what happened to me. The French Foreign Legion ends up, of all things, French Foreign Legion, they have a base there. They wind up finding us and stabilizing us, me and the driver, and we had the two other docs there with us helping out, long enough for them to get their helicopter to us, fly us out to their hospital in Djibouti City, and from there I go to it's called Camp Lemonnier. It's our United States Air Base in Djibouti. I get to Landstuhl, Germany, where I'm put into a coma. I'm either put into a coma there or still in Africa, because my brain function was quickly declining. when I first got hurt, I was able to tell you my name. I was able to tell you what day it was, but that was rapidly getting worse to the point where they said, we need to put his brain to sleep. We need to shut him down because this is not good. So I end up in Germany. Meanwhile, my wife and parents receive a call from my unit, and it was basically, Joel's been hurt in an accident. We don't know how he's doing or anything like that. So it was probably a pretty big shock to my family. They spent the next week waiting to see if I was even going to survive the trip from Germany to the United States, because it was the injury was that severe to where they had to figure out if they could get all the medical equipment that I needed onto a helicopter and onto a plane and get me across the ocean, and then two, if I was even going to survive for that long to be able to put in the effort there, or would I just be gone? So I had to wait a week, and apparently I survived, and a week later I get flown to Bethesda. It's a naval medical center. It's a hospital in Maryland, and that's where a lot of the members of the military that are hurt bad enough to where they can't go back to their unit, they get sent there. So a lot of blast injuries, bullet wounds, and then regular, trauma injuries like mine. I spent the next, I think, almost 2 weeks in a medically induced coma, and they would cut off bring me out of sedation every morning just to see how I was doing, and the entire time they said basically my brain stress levels were accelerating or getting worse when they bring me out of sedation. So like, okay, let's put him back under sedation. And one day they brought my family in. They said, hey, so and these are some of the best doctors in the world. They've said, we've never seen anything like this before. We don't know what else to do. We've tried to take him out of sedation for this long. Every morning we do that, his brain levels spike, and we have no other plans because we've tried everything we could. So we're going to take him out of sedation, but you guys, tomorrow morning, but you guys need to be ready because when we do so, he might die, and if he doesn't die, he'll either become what's referred to, the vegetable is something that, but basically non-functioning. And you'll have to make the call on whether to pull the plug or not tomorrow. So family hears that, and they were a little upset, I'm sure, I hope. But they bring me out of sedation the next day, and for some reason, my brain levels did not spike. It stopped bleeding. There was for some reason, some kind of improvement to my state, the state of my brain. They weren't expecting that at all. So they said, well, let's just go with this. Let's keep him out of it and see how far it goes, because they had no idea to what level I would recover. And from there, it was the long process of I had to learn my name. I had to learn how to talk. I had to learn how to write. I had to learn how to sit up in a chair. I wasn't allowed to drink water because I might choke on it. So I had a breathing tube and a feeding tube in for a while. I had to do these activities of going shopping, something so simple, but figuring out how to solve a simple task. And that was my baseline. There would be a doctor that would come in and hold up a pen, and they'd say, this is the one I remember. She would hold up a pen and she'd say, what is this? And then she would move on to something else, and maybe a minute or so later, hold up this other object. And then at that time, I would say, pen. So it was taking a long time for signals to get from my brain and to my mouth to be able to speak them. And that's one of the things that I remember. But one of the first questions I remember asking was, I looked over at the doctor or the nurse and I said, can I still be a cop? Because that's something I'd always wanted to do. My grandfather was a state trooper, my father was a police officer, and it's something that I always wanted to do. And they said, more or less, you can't even sit up in a chair, so let's not get that far ahead of ourselves. And so that was the answer to my question, and then it just went about 6 months of just intensive rehabilitation, learning to do all those things again, how to alphabetize, how to solve a simple problem that, before the accident I took for granted that I was able to do all these things. When I got hurt, I was about 185 pounds. I was in decent shape. When the ambulance landed in Bethesda and my wife got to see me, she told me that she started bawling because of how I looked. The medical, the physical changes that your body goes through when you've endured that kind of stress, and then the medical interventions. She started crying. And then when I came out of the coma, I was 155 pounds and completely weak. And so it was basically starting from zero. And I did that for about 3 years. While I was in the Marine Corps, I went to college classes and stuff like that, tried to figure out what I wanted to do, and ended up out here in Colorado, going to Colorado State. And I was part of a group for veterans that had sustained some kind of injury, and it was a cool group. People like-minded, wanted to focus on, okay, what are we going to do now, and find a productive way to contribute. I remember sitting down with one of the transitions advisors, who I still keep in touch with. Her name's Erica. I said, hey, we figured out that I was going to major in social work because I liked that idea of helping people in need, families in need, and I remembered from my own experiences the support systems that were there for my family and for me, and I could see the value in it. So I kind of wanted to do something like that. And I said to her, I said, I still kind of wish I could be a cop. And she goes, well, why can't you? And I'm like, well, I had a traumatic brain injury and almost died. She's like, well, you seem fine to me. So at that point, I was like, she might be onto something. And so I kind of had this moment where I remember the feeling that I had when I deployed to Iraq in 2005. And our mission there was responding to IED blasts, weapons caches we'd found, weapons or IEDs that units had found before they exploded and stuff. I remember that feeling of, we would go on those missions and go to those calls, and it was an awesome feeling. It was terrifying at times, but I remember the thrill that I got from that, and it was just an incredibly valuable mission that we did there. And so I could never get rid of that feeling. And so I was thinking, well, I'd like to help people, that need it, support. I recognize the value of support and presence and willingness to help, but I also recognize the value in going to something that is very substantial, meaning it can be dangerous and you're needed right then and there. And now I can combine the two, and I was like, well, okay, yeah, that's being a police officer. So I started reaching out and started training jiu-jitsu, ran a half marathon for some reason. I think it was by force because I hate running, but I managed to do it, and just stuck with it. And I put in an application here at Greeley because I saw that Greeley's a growing city. It's a busy city, and there's good support from the community here, and I could see the value in that. And this kind of stuck out to me as an awesome place to look into, and that's how I ended up here. And since coming here, I haven't been disappointed at all. It's difficult, it's hard, but there's a good structure of your peers, your supervisors that want you to succeed, want you to learn, and that's hard to find, I think. So that's a long story of how I ended up here. And I'm very grateful for everything that's happened and everybody who's been there for me and everybody who I get to work with every day here. Thank you.
And you're alive.
Yeah, and I'm alive, yeah.
I think after everyone has seen this video, we're obviously wondering what happened. Was there any injuries? Was there any fatalities? Give us like the end story, like how everyone else is that happened from that day.
Sure. End story would be I survived, obviously. The driver survived. He had his injuries but recovered. The two Marines that were at the mortar blast, one of them was good to return to his unit. The other one was sent back to the United States, and my wife and his wife kept in touch. He ends up getting he recovering and then having a baby, and he would check in on me when I was in my recovery process. So all things considered, it wasn't that bad. They got everybody out of there, and everybody got the medical care they needed and did something good with their recovery time.
Wonderful. That's great news. So Joel, just tell me and everyone else, how long was your entire recovery process from the day it happened until the day where you felt like you're better?
So the recovery process started, I think it was May 26, 2009, which is the day that it happened. I was medically retired in, I believe, June or July of 2012. So between that time, those years, it was every day was a recovery, an opportunity to recover. If you took your therapy seriously and actually put some effort into it, you'd get something out of it. And that's kind of what I did. So I would say all told about 3 years of intensive recovery. And then since, then it's, I don't know, I feel as normal as I possibly can. And end state, I learned so much from it that I can't complain about how long the process took at all.
Awesome.
Yeah.